We interrupt this program to bring you the Design Hustle podcast, conversations around successful design journeys. Take it away, Ali.
Hello, and welcome back to another episode of Design Hustle podcast. I just got done speaking with Daria Tarawneh. I've really worked on the pronunciation here. I hope I got it right. Head of Enterprise Design at Miro and Head of User Experience Design at Amazon previously, and of course, McKinsey, and a host of other companies. Her design journey has been really fascinating. She's traveled all over the world, opened new doors. Our conversation revolved around a lot of interesting topics where we touched upon the importance of resilience and not giving up and changing professions to finding a niche, how her passion for being an enterprise designer has become a niche, a superpower for her. We spoke about a lot of different things like courage and passion, and this is what she had to say. Daria Tarawneh, welcome to the show.
Thank you so much. Thank you for having me. I'm really excited to be on the show.
So I'm just going to start off directly because there's certain people who are very easy to sort of give an introduction to, but then how do I give an introduction to someone like you who has sort of changed their professions? So, what do you identify as?
I would say I'm a problem solver. Like I like to look at problems and find solution. For me, it's like a puzzle. Or it's like something that you want to get into it and you cannot stop thinking about it until you actually solve it. And if I look at the entirety of my career, I'm always like seeking these problems that nobody solved or nobody want to touch because it's super complicated and it's not fun, it's not exciting to get into that field. And I just find myself very much drawn into these areas. So I will say I've always been a problem solver. And it's like the thrill of like, oh, I got it. It's very exciting for me.
That's awesome. That's a great answer because that would mean that you can sort of change or access different toolkits to solve problems. So if it's a product problem, then maybe a UX toolkit, or maybe if it's an architectural problem, then it's the architectural toolkit and so forth. And this sort of leads to the question, right? So were you always a design focused or an artistic, creative child growing up?
Yes, I was. Growing up, since ever I remember, I was drawn to a pen and a pencil. And I just liked to read and draw. This was my thing. I never played outside. I don't even know how to ride a bike. I was not an outdoorsy person. I was always this like sitting at home, drawing or reading. And somehow my mother kind of noticed this. Like I'm a little bit different than my sisters. And when I was, I think, 15 or 16, she put me in art school. So I spent 3 years or 4 years in art school until I went to university. And when I finished my high school, it was just like, there was not a question of what am I going to do? It was like, okay, you have one choice, basically. And that choice was architecture. And I say one choice is because I personally come from a culture and a background where my entire family are either engineers or doctors. Like my two parents are doctors. So you, of course, have to choose a career. And being from the Middle East, growing up in the Middle East, you have to choose either a doctor or an engineer. So, of course, when I finished high school, it was, the closest thing or the only thing I would study was architecture. And the architecture where I'm from in Jordan, it's actually part of the engineering school. So it was like I ticked the box for my parents and I ticked the box of what I wanted to do. And that's how I ended up studying architecture. Funny story.
So was it something that you had a passion, or did you develop a passion while you were doing it?
Studying was a lot of fun because when you're studying, you have the chance to look at the big picture or to think about what could be possible and what can you do. And of course, like looking at the architects that were super famous at the time, there was a lot of thought process behind why are they doing what they're doing. And I was a big fan of Zaha Hadid and Rim Koolhaas, and I was just reading their philosophy behind their buildings. And when I graduated and I started working, I kind of felt like my whole world collapsed. Like everything I knew about being an architect, this is not what I signed up for, and this is not what I wanted to do. And I think the passion is still there. Like until today, I still read architectural books. I still travel just to look at buildings. But to me, working and being so much into the details, it didn't feel like that is something I want to do for the rest of my life. So I worked as an architect for 3 years. And then I changed career and I worked as an urban planner. But still, it didn't give me what I wanted. And I couldn't see myself doing this for the rest of my life. And that's how I looked for change, basically.
So, was it like you were actively looking for change or something just happened? So, dropped on you?
It was one of these accidental times. What happened is that while I was studying, I started working at a cafe. And it was an art cafe. It just seemed like a fit. I enjoyed hanging out there. And they said, hey, would you like to come and work with us and do events and like art-focused events? And I thought, okay, that's fun. I'm always here anyway. So I might as well support myself, right? And what happened is I was working on my last project and I was sitting in the corner. I remember drawing these little tiny illustrations, like very small ones that in my mind, okay, this will go into the presentation of my final project as an architect. And I just met randomly a guy who said, you're an architect, you can draw. We are looking for somebody who will join us in our company. And it turns out that there was a group of very young, very ambitious people who were developing a game back then. And they were looking for somebody to come in and design the buildings and design how the ships would look from the inside. It was a sci-fi game. It was really cool. And I thought, all right, this could be fun. At that time, I was very young. I barely knew what Photoshop is because we used AutoCAD most of the time. I'm like, okay, I can draw with pen on paper. What do you want me to learn? And they said, okay, you have to learn Photoshop, and there's like this awesome pen that you can draw with, and the image will come out magically on the screen. And I was like, whoa, this is amazing. I can do this. And I started working with them. And then even when I was working as an architect, I was working with them as a part-time. And at some point, I realized, oh, this work is a lot more fun and a lot more fulfilling than my actual real job. And when I started working with these guys, that's when I learned a lot. That's when I learned like, oh, you can create buttons and this is called UI. And back then it was in 2003 and it was like nobody knew what UI is and nobody knew what UX is. It was just like something really cool and only very few people who were talking about it. And I thought, I don't know what UI is, but this is sound cool. I'm doing buttons, and when the user presses the button, they can go somewhere, and that's fun. And I think that's how I actually started my career as a designer. It was pure, complete accident. I did not know that something that existed, but I'm really thankful for that moment and that encounter, that very small encounter that I had in my life that really shaped my journey and got me to where I am right now.
That's amazing. So, I told you when we were offline that what we share in common is architecture, the stack. That's how we started. For me, again, coming from that background, it's like you do engineering, dentistry,
Yeah.
medicine. My dad was an architect and so forth. However, so I had a huge problem. I had ideas that I wanted to fulfill, but those ideas couldn't be solved directly through the architectural lens or the toolkit, right? And that is why, as you said, like I had to now then figure out what did I have to learn. But at the same time, I was banking on this instinct or this power that I felt I had. What's your superpower, or what's that? Where does that confidence comes from? Because I'm sure you dealt with the imposter syndrome once you entered into a new industry, right?
Still do. I don't think imposter syndrome goes away. I think you just make peace with it somehow. Um, I think what I believe in is you can plan your life as much as you want, but life has better plans for you all the time. So what I try to do is just to be open for opportunities, even if this is something I've never done, or even if something that it sounds at the beginning very difficult. I think that fight where you're fighting the comfort zone, that's what kind of like gives me always the power to move on. It's like, okay, what's the worst thing could happen? You fail, and then you try again, and then you fail again, and then you learn, and then you try the third time, and maybe the fourth time. So I think that like keep telling to keep telling myself that it's okay. Failure is fine. It's part of your progress. It's part of your journey. And if you're really afraid of failure, or you're really afraid of trying something new, you will never progress. It's just the progress will never happen, basically.
That's super inspiring. So I'm going to jump back into some countries that you worked in, right? And again, this is part of the whole thing. I was like, okay, so who is this person? Why is she traveling all over the world? Why is she working for one of the best companies everywhere? How does she do it? Like, so I'm not going to drop the names yet. I'd like you to sort of tell us your journey, the country,
The story.
the role, and then the companies and so forth, and how you got there.
So I was saying how you should jump on opportunities without overthinking it, right? And that was my mantra my entire life. So we were talking about like being an architect, and I thought I will give it one last chance. I will go to London, and then I would get my REBA certificate, like, which is a certificate that allows you to work in multiple countries. Because I always knew I want to work in different countries. I wanted to travel. So I go to London for 6 months, and I hated it so badly. And then I thought, okay, I think I've already invested 5 years in my studies. Doing 3 more years is a lot for me to figure out, like, is this something I want to do or not? So I came back. And when I came back, my partner and I, we were thinking, okay, we want to go somewhere. We were very young, and we wanted to leave and just explore the world. And we knew that the only chance for us to do that was for one of us to get a job somewhere. And somehow we were looking for jobs, and we had multiple options in the world. And somehow life took us to New Zealand. So we ended up in New Zealand. It was a very interesting time because we sold everything we have. And I think I was 23 at the time. And you put your whole life in a bag, you jump on a plane, and then you go to a country that you've never been. And funny enough, in New Zealand doesn't appear on most of the maps. So if you have a map that is old, like an old map from the 90s, it's actually cut from the side. So you see Australia and New Zealand is out. So when we were saying, okay, we go to New Zealand, I got the map. I'm like, where is New Zealand? I'm sorry for being an ignorant, but I don't see it on the map. So we jumped on a plane, we get there. And it was very interesting time because looking for a job was not easy. So I was like talking to a few people, trying to network to find something what I would be interested in at that point. And then I met 2 amazing friends of mine, and we were sitting at some point at a cafe, and we thought, wouldn't it be cool if somebody plays a game and then gets a voucher or a prize after? And then we thought, oh, that's a really cool idea. Does it exist? We started looking, and there was no such thing. So we decided we will build it. I had a gaming experience. My other friend had a business experience, and the other one had a marketing experience. So we thought we got it covered, right? So we found a developer. We developed this system, and it kind of worked. So we started developing games as advertisement. So you play like a very simple HTML5 game. HTML5 was very big at the time. And then at the end, you actually win a prize. And it's a physical prize. Either it's sent to you or you get a voucher. So things started to become bigger and bigger. And we realized, wait a minute, we could automate the whole process. Like, we don't have to create a game from scratch every time we get a request. It doesn't have to be an agency model. So we thought there's a lot of great games out there with developers who are looking to monetize. We have network of advertisers who are looking for games like these fast games. Why not connect the two and make the whole process automated? So the developers will plug in their games, advertisers pick a game. Using our engine, they would change the art, change a little bit in the game, and then publish it. Voila. So that went really crazy in New Zealand and Australia. We didn't expect the success that we had. And from there, we thought we want to expand. And I don't know why this thought process was in our mind at that time, but one of the founders was Japanese. He was living in New Zealand all his life. He doesn't speak Japanese, but we thought, he's Japanese. We can move to Japan, and in Japan, people play games. Yeah, that's a 25-year-old logic, I guess. And I always joke, if I knew what I know right now, I don't think I would have done it. So I hopped on a flight, and I ended up in Japan. I don't speak Japanese. I've never been there. And he doesn't speak Japanese. He was traveling there to visit his grandma. And I ended up moving to Tokyo. And we tried to open an office. So little that we knew that the Japanese market doesn't work like any other market. You cannot start a startup because startups are not a thing there, at least back in that time. Hiring developers to work with us was almost impossible because they don't switch jobs. They stay in one job for the rest of their life. Everything we built, all the games that we built, they didn't work for a simple reason that the Japanese people play games on the train. And they have great Wi-Fi. They have amazing network. But if you're standing in the train, you have one hand up and you're using your phone with one hand. So we needed to redesign all the games to be horizontal games where you can actually reach every spot of the phone with your thumb, or every clickable spot with your phone. So that was an interesting time, redefining everything, trying to open a place, trying to get a credit card because Japanese people don't know what a credit card is. So it was an interesting 6 months until we realized if we want to open a development house that will serve the Japanese market, we need to find somewhere else. So we looked at other areas, and then we thought Manila would be the best option. So I ended up moving to Manila, working between Japan and Philippines, and because our clients were in Tokyo and our development house was in Manila. So this was like a really interesting time going between cultures, and that taught me a lot about working within the Asian culture, because it's so different than the Western culture or the American culture. There's a very big hierarchy. So you as a manager or as a boss, you have the last word, and typically nobody will challenge you. So at some point I was telling them the wrong thing, hoping that they would challenge me, and they wouldn't. And then I realized I really need to think about it differently. And this is not something that I've known my entire life. There's a completely different perspective here that I need to learn in order for me to be successful. So working there for 2 years, I decided to move. And I wanted to do something different because I've been doing this for quite some time. And this is how I ended up actually in Germany. So this was like the countries that I lived in, and how I think just being open to the fact that I'm going to pack my things in a suitcase and move and see where life will take. That's what I was saying. Like, for me, this was like the way I lived my life.
That's very inspiring. But the way you make it sound is like, oh, okay, like, like you're living out of your suitcase. It's not just packing everything. It's like it's technically not really sure, and you're doing whatever it takes to sort of establish what you want to do and have a go at it, right? So, and then it brings you to Germany, right? And then in Germany, I see that you worked with McKinsey. And currently, you are the head of enterprise design at Miro.
Yes.
Is that correct?
Correct.
Okay.
That's correct.
So, what's that journey like? What's sorry? Just before, let me articulate it better. So because McKinsey is a consultancy model, and Miro is a product enterprise.
Yeah.
As let's say, it's totally different cultures, right? Because I've worked for both sort of product sets. Uh, start from there. So culturally, company wise, yeah.
Different. I actually worked for a company in between. So I worked for Amazon Web Services between McKinsey and Miro. And what happened is I thought that I've never been a consultant. I've never worked in an agency. And I thought that this step was missing in my career and in what I wanted to learn. So I joined McKinsey. I really loved it. And I really enjoyed it. I got the chance to work with big clients, very ambitious dreams. But I realized that I'm a product person. So when Amazon contacted me to come and work for AWS, I was a huge fan. I worked with AWS before. I was one of their clients, and I really wanted to jump on that opportunity. So I worked for AWS for 7 years, and then I thought if I would never leave now, I will never leave. I will be a lifer. So I was looking at everyone around me, and then it's a huge place, right? Like you can go from, like I was working on the cloud services, and you can go to the e-commerce side, or you can even like there's some really cool opportunities. You can even work in the movies, right? Because Amazon make their own movies. So people tend to jump between different sectors. And what I thought, the jump would be fun because you're working in a different industry, but then you're still bound with the same culture. And I just didn't want this to be all I know. And I was a big fan of Miro. They were building their enterprise product, and this is my entire experience. And that's like my area of expertise. So I joined Miro to build their enterprise offering. And I've been with Miro for almost a little bit more than a year and a half right now, dealing with all what I like to call the back office, like the things that you don't see, but if they don't work well, the end user will suffer. Like things like permissions and roles and compliance and securities. Where's the data stored? That will impact your journey as an end user. Like where the data is stored and where you're connecting from will impact your login or sign up, or if you're finding the right boards or not. So we're like the silent team that nobody knows what we do, but if we do a mistake, it's a huge escalation and nobody can do anything. So yeah, this is my specialty. I think this is my expertise.
That's really interesting, because I've never sort of seen a title per se. Generally, what they do is like, so titles on a product are different
Yeah,
based on different companies. So
definitely.
a title of enterprise design is, why is it sort of like separated from the product, let's say?
Yeah.
Or maybe are there multiple different verticals that you have
Yeah.
in the design side? So can you explain that a little more? Not
Yeah.
just because of Miro, just because of like a product
Yeah.
based
In general.
in
Yeah.
general, yeah.
This is definitely a I wouldn't say an industry, but I will say more like an expertise that in the last few years started to come out. And I've seen it shift, like even the way we're thinking about design and enterprise. I've seen it go from we'll design whatever, we'll let, I really hate to say it, but sometimes like I hear it a lot, like we'll let the developers design and then customers will buy it anyway. So this was like the mental model where if you're working on a developer heavy product, you don't need designers, or if you're working in the back office area, you don't need a designer. But the shift that has been happening in the last maybe like 10 years, and I'm seeing it more in the last 5 years, where we're discovering that enterprise products, they also need to be as simple as a consumer product. So we started calling it enterprise grade, consumer grade enterprise design, where it follows the same methodologies and it follows the same principles, where things needs to be simple, or things needs to make the work of that particular persona more efficient. It requires a certain kind of skill and a certain kind of a mindset, because if you're working in this field, you're probably dealing with a lot of legacy, and dealing with legacy is very painful because you're thinking ahead, but you also need to ship features. So you need to kind of like have that duality in your thinking. At the same time, you need to have like difficult conversations with the engineers of what can and what cannot be done, and how can you be creative and think a little bit beyond what the usual UX design. Because if you're working on a consumer UX, you're probably using a lot of A/B testing, you're using a lot of heat maps, and you're doing a lot of research. But in this field, things become a little bit different, because A/B testing, it doesn't really give us results, because these companies are purchasing a software for millions of dollars. So they're not going to move or change their purchase decision. There's a process for that, like how that purchase decision comes to light. So it's a little bit more complicated. And from a designer perspective, or from a career perspective, the projects that you work on take years to see the light. So of course it's a little bit frustrating. Most of the outcome, or most of your design work, you're doing a lot of dashboards, insights, forms and tables, and things that are not entirely creative per se from a visual perspective. And your criteria of success is, did I make things simpler? Did I make somebody's life easier? So I think it's not your typical design. And if you want to go into that field, you really need to change your mindset and be okay sometimes with portfolios that have a lot of flows or a lot of thinking, and be okay with working on a product that will take maybe a year to release the MVP. And even then, people might like it or might hate it. So yeah, I think this is what the reality is. And what I'm seeing is more and more companies are hiring these specific expertise designers within this field, especially after the pandemic, where the SaaS product became like a craze. And then you've got products like Slack or Salesforce that redefined what good UX is. Of course, they're new, they don't have to deal with a lot of legacy, so they have the opportunity to be a bit more creative or a bit more fun. And that sparked a whole debate in the old industries, where we need to hire more designers, we need to make things look better, feel more organic, be more efficient. And I was just lucky that I was part of, like, this was the core of my career, and I was part of it. Yeah.
You know what I learned right now while you were talking, and I was looking at my portfolio thinking. So I'm like, you know what? Because it's, the more projects you've done over the years, the more companies you work with as a contractor, it gets more messy and messy to define what your expertise is, what you're good at. So if I say like, oh, I like solving problems, and then I like different industries, and I like online products, it doesn't say anything about anything, right? So it's so generic. And I was just thinking, like, what I learned right now from this discussion was because I was too focused on industry. And now the focus somehow in my head sort of shifted towards probably defining enterprise, because I've worked on a lot of enterprise SaaS and legacy products and so forth in all industries, right? So if you look at finance, healthcare, all these have legacy issues, right? ERP platform, SAP, and da 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 da. It's just all this debt
Oh, the same.
needs to, yeah, exactly. So, and yeah, so thanks for that insight, because I think for a lot of people, if they're thinking and they're listening to what you just said, it's that niche, that vertical, that is still not a lot of people pay attention to that.
It's interesting because I do a lot of talks in some conferences, and basically I talk a lot about enterprise design and building for legacies or research in enterprise. And every time I go to a new conference, I'm always a little bit scared, because what if I say something that people don't like, or they say, okay, it's boring. But it was quite interesting, especially last year, where I'm seeing more conferences have like an enterprise specific track, and more designers coming in and asking me questions about like the details of the work or how can they get into it. And I think this is like it's becoming like a new thing, or not a new thing, but probably there's more light that is being shed on it. Yeah. And of course you can start looking at it from multiple angles, like what's the future, where AI fits in, is AI the right thing for this industry, how do we change things, how do we make the admins or the developers not afraid of the product that they are using, or that this product is going to fail them. It's very interesting debate that is happening right now.
That's so cool. So one thing about now specifically about the product that you're working on, Miro, right? So Miro has been like almost like the source of inspiration for all these collaborative tools now, right? So what does that mean for someone who's working there? What's that pressure like, where now the whole industry is technically they were following you, and now they're trying to sort of run with you as competitors?
I will say that it is fun. It's a lot of fun. Because we experiment a lot, and sometimes like the features we build, we try it first as Mironeers, and we validate it, and some of them see the light, some of them don't see the light, but there's a lot of experimentation going. There's a lot of thought process. We think a lot about the future, and what I think makes it very successful, and that's why I do believe in Miro and where it's heading in the future, is you have that true collaboration between design, engineer, and PM. So it is a unit, and the responsibility falls upon the unit. So when you have a team of very highly capable individuals that working together, covering it from every angle, focusing a lot on the customer needs, or how to solve a customer problem, especially in the space of collaboration, I believe that this is what a successful company, the recipe of a successful company that would build amazing products. So, and I see it from our customers, right? Like a lot of the customers that we work with, they really love the features that we build. They come to us and they say, oh, like, this is awesome. They use it in ways that we've never imagined that they would use it. Like, I think the coolest thing I've seen during the pandemic, there were some individuals in a company that they were using Miro as a virtual gaming board for their D&D during the pandemic to keep the team morale, which is kind of super cool, right? And I think that's the power. You have that infinite canvas. You could use tools out of the box, but you could also make your own tools. And this is what I don't see in the other existing tools that are trying to keep up. I also don't see it as a competition, right? Like, I think the biggest factor in anything that you do if you're working on a product, and what would make it successful or make it best in the market is, are you looking at the customer needs and building a product that they love? And if you're doing that, you will be very successful by nature, right? This is also like a philosophy that I believe in, and working for Amazon, this was something that it's like completely ingrained. Don't look at the competition, because if you look at the competition, you will follow the same mistakes that they have done. We're all looking at the same source, which is the customer pain points, the customer needs, and making their life more efficient and making their life better, right? So if you focus on that, you will move forward rather than copying somebody else's mistakes. And that's what I personally, as a lead designer, try to get my team to believe in. It's like, you can look for inspiration and think what is good and what's bad, but we also do features that are not very successful, or we also do mistakes, right? So, but we don't tell people that this is a mistake. The mistake goes live, and then we are on the background working on fixing it. Why the other companies are not in the same space, where like it's exactly the same culture or exactly the same things that happen to companies. So yeah, maybe it's a personal belief of mine that competition is there for inspiration, but not precisely to follow or to focus on, if you want to be very successful in the market.
Yeah, I hear you. I think I'm perfectly in tune with your philosophy there, because I think if you don't have competition, then probably you're doing something wrong. Because
Exactly.
it's just like, yeah, it's like, why is there no competition, right? Because this product seems to work, and why does nobody else want to do this? Like, maybe so yeah.
Maybe this is not the right product. I don't know.
Yeah, absolutely. It's just to end this one. So from my perspective, um, on an infinite canvas as a product, when you have elements that you can drop and do stuff with, right? It's like this infinite playground. You drop blocks. Uh, and I recently had my daughter, so now I see like kids how they really play. Thank you. So it's like this playground that they have. But the only interaction that we have right now are those horizontal bars that have controls, right? And
Yeah.
Miro was one of the early first few couple of platforms that introduced that.
Yeah.
And now that I would say that uh, standardization of canvas controls has come to a point where it's bothering me now, where it's like, because they've done that since the last 7 years, right? And so what's next? So what do you think is the future of interaction on this invisible, or not sorry, invisible, infinite spaces?
Canvas.
Yeah.
Having an infinite space gives you the power to create something that is closer to a single pane of glass. And that idea of a single pane of glass is very powerful. Like, probably every project I worked on in my entire career, the goal was single pane of glass. And if you look at the reality of how people do their job, we're probably using 4 or 5 tools at the same time with multiple tabs open. If you're very tidy, you probably have 10 tabs. If you're messy, you have an infinite amount of tabs. And you're constantly juggling, say, and you're constantly juggling between these tabs, right? And what I really love about Miro and that idea of the infinite canvas is that you can bring in other tools and then chuck them in with having these powerful integrations. So you can have your YouTube next to, like, YouTube widget next to your graphs, next to your text, next to your sticky notes and some tables and some docs, and instantly jump between one tool and the other in order for you to do a job, like whether that job is to build a product or me personally, I love Miro to plan my vacations, for example, or to plan my trip, right? Because I will have my calendar, I'll have pictures, I will have like a table of times and reservation notes and so on. So it allows you to do this, right? In terms of interaction, I think we live in a world that we are so used to certain interactions and they become ingrained in us. So, for example, you want to take a picture, you get your phone, you press on the button that has to be below because that's the best optimized option. The button cannot be at the top of the screen, right? And I think there's been a lot of work that is done by amazing designers to find what are the most efficient interactions that we can use and what we cannot use. And as consumers of products, we are used to these interactions, and there's so many apps and so many products out there that you could use or you can benefit from, right? So I think that led to a certain standardization when it comes to certain interactions, because that is expectations from the end user. And if you are changing from the norm without clear reason why are you changing from the norm, or without a lot of research in terms of is this going to work or not, it will put your product in a uncompetitive advantage, because as a user I have to go and learn your shortcuts, right? And then it's annoying for me because, like, imagine I'm using Photoshop and I'm using Illustrator and I'm using Figma, and the 3 shortcuts are completely different. So in order for me to do my job, I need a cheat sheet. It's horrible, right? So I think we are in this age where we could think about how do we build on top of these interactions and how do we build on top of this foundation. Question it when it needs to be questioned, but the change for the sake of a change, I don't think we can afford that at the moment. But building on top of existing mental model, building on top of existing truth, you would be able to innovate so much faster and get to what you need to get so much easier, right? Because this is how history works. When you build a car, you don't innovate on the wheel. Well, you could, but you're not going to change the wheel from being round to being square. And I think that's in an interesting way, this is where we are right now as designers, especially as interaction designers. Where is the innovation lies? Is it in the details? Is it on building on top of the details? I don't know. That's why it's fun to be in this field.
That's amazing. That's a great answer. I just have one more question for you.
Mm-hmm.
I feel like we're looking at AI right now through a very singular lens, single one-dimensional. Okay, help me get stuff done, right? Okay, give me a summary. What ideas can you Can you just summarize this for me? I feel maybe there is something about interactions being the second level where AI can come in to somehow help us interact with the thing. So it's an unanswered question. I think I'm just doing some long thinking here, just because I know it's you from Miro. I'm sitting with you. Maybe I can get some good ideas here. One last question, Daria. So you mentioned a challenging situation in your life that you made it into a superpower, and that was really inspiring. I didn't ask about it before because I know I wouldn't have stopped talking about it. So it's like this 5 minutes in the end. I'd really love to hear more about that, because I think a lot of people will get inspiration from this.
So so we were talking a little bit about like challenges, and I think one thing that I like to share a lot with, especially with the junior designers, is I personally have ADHD. So I have hyper focus ADHD. And what I think this is a superpower for me as someone who works in a complex industry, and especially as a manager, because that gives me the ability to switch context very fast and to talk about like one topic, and then the next hour I'm talking about something completely different. It's like a switch in your mind, right? Or when it comes to like a big problem, it's so interesting for me to sit down and then go really deep into it. And of course, this has been challenging because there are certain things that I'm not really good at or I cannot do. Um, and working as a designer, I really struggled. And I found ways and tools in order for me to overcome that struggle or to turn that challenge into a superpower by I like to say that I'm tricking the situation or I'm tricking the context. I cannot change the context, but how do I change the environment around me in order for the result to be very different? And I see this a lot with the designers that I work with. Either like I mentor a lot of female designers who are suffering from ADHD, and I have a lot of designers who do have ADHD. And there's a few interesting patterns that I see within um, somebody who has a neurodivergent brain, right? And we work together in order to find a hack. So, for example, one of the coolest hacks is that a lot of people don't realize that it's really hard to look at to see details. And if you're designing on a screen, you're missing things. You either not seeing that something is not aligned, or you're not seeing that you didn't change the text on one of the button. So my trick was, and I teach that to everyone, print it. Print the work. Take a look at it. It's always so much easier when you're looking at the printed work. And then you can modify before you take the design to be reviewed or you're showing it to your manager. And you don't have to fall into these small details that you um, it's not that you don't want to see it. It's like you cannot see it sometimes. So I try to work a lot to give that confidence, because it's not easy to say, well, my brain is not a typical brain. So I try to be very vocal about it. I try to um, talk with a lot of the designers who are coming into the industry to also make them be vocal about it, and to say very proudly that, look, this is what I have, and this is what I can do, and this is what I cannot do. Could you work with me to find hacks for the problems? And could we find a way to work together in a way that would be comfortable for both of us, right? And I believe that this is part of being inclusive in the workspace, where not everyone works the same hours or being very productive at the same hours. I have team members who work so much better at night, so they're doing most of their productive work late in the evening. And some folks who are early risers, and they like to do work from 7 to 10, and that's their most productive times. And I don't believe there's a one blanket that I can say, this is what you have to do within this time frame, within these hours. I don't believe this is the right approach if we want to be inclusive in the workspace, or if we want to be successful. So I try to look at these like small details and kind of find ways to be able to collaborate in a way that works for everyone. Because if we're all finding the right ways, then the product that we come up with or the product that we build will be a lot more successful.
Thank you so much for sharing this. So full disclosure, I'm an undiagnosed borderline dyslexic myself, right? So, and I discovered that in my mid-30s, and I'm like, oh, okay. So as you said, I use it. Yeah, absolutely. It's like, why don't I make sense of words? What are these words? Like, and I make spelling mistakes, and it's okay. And I allow myself to look at the same thing 10 times, and it's okay. So as you said, we learn to find a way to cope with it. But you went the extra mile where you said, okay, it's not about coping, but it's about, let's make it into a superpower. I think that's really cool.
Yeah.
Daria, it was so much fun talking to you, and Personally, I learned a lot from you, and I'm sure a lot of other people did. Thank you so much for coming.
Thank you so much. It was a pleasure to be here with you.
The Design Hustle Podcast.